that just perfectly crystallizes the fundamental problem that we face right now as a nation. Here's the quote from it. Trump campaign officials have expressed worry that he could be pushing to open things too quickly and that any resulting deaths will not be forgiven by voters in November. That's the quote. So the president's campaign advisors are trying to get the president not to go down a path that will result in thousands of people dying unnecessarily because they think it will be bad politics, that it will be bad for his campaign as they try to get him reelected. That's the reporting. And it just shows the fundamental problem we're facing now as a nation that we have been facing for months. The reality is we now have nearly 1 million cases of coronavirus. We have more than 55,000 dead Americans. And they're not just numbers. Every day, more and more people that you and I know, friends of yours or loved ones or loved ones of friends. I remember at the beginning of this, coronavirus was this thing that we tracked, right, the numbers of, but distant, we heard about it. Now it's not. I mean, is there anyone who does not know someone who's been sick, someone who's died? This is what it looks like in the sympathy card section in supermarkets and drugstores across this nation. There's not a single one left there. They're completely sold out. The grief and the trauma is creeping into every crevice of American life. And so now the president is trying to roll out a policy based on what will look good for him politically and for his reelection chances, what will win him more votes in the fall. But here's the thing. We all want to open the country up. We all want to go back to some kind of normal. If you look around, there are some places that are trying to do it in a thoughtful and safe way. Take, for example, the country's two biggest car makers, GM and Ford. They're bringing some people back to work to build ventilators and personal protective equipment. Here's how they are doing it.
Before I walked into this facility today, I had my temperature scanned. I think it's a very important part of the protocol.
Morning. How you doing? Good. How are you? In the plant I'm in today, we're wearing face masks and we're wearing face shields. Morning.
Ford's executive chairman, Bill Ford, said the company has also installed plastic barriers between each workstation to enforce social distancing.
Everybody is also wearing watches that buzz if you get within 6 feet of somebody else.
So that's a major U.S. car manufacturers, the management and the labor unions, United Auto Workers, coming together with smart, safe, creative solutions to try to do work. And we're not alone in this, right? Almost every country in the world is battling the exact same virus. It's the same disease everywhere. It's contagious everywhere. It is killing people everywhere. And economies are on lockdown and standstill everywhere. And no leader wants that to be the case. And everyone has been faced with the same set of difficult choices. And it is as tough a governing problem as probably anyone has ever faced, right? Everyone is trying to solve it in their own way. After nearly 2 months of lockdown, yesterday, the Prime Minister of Italy announced new guidelines for easing that country's lockdown. It will start with reopening parks, factories, and building sites and allowing people to visit their relatives in small numbers. Italy, of course, one of the hardest hit countries in the world. Now they're trying to phase in some return to some kind of normal. Now, other countries acted early, and they avoided Italy's fate, and they avoided our fate. Taiwan has even managed to avoid a lockdown by putting in place measures like cell phone contact tracing, temperature checks, and social distancing. In New Zealand, the Prime Minister just announced it has stopped community transmission of the coronavirus. And starting on Tuesday, because they've done that, because they've been successful and they moved quickly, a bunch of non-essential businesses, healthcare and education activity will be able to resume. New Zealand is one of the places that has had the toughest level of social restrictions. Same with Australia. As of Sunday, only 60 new cases were recorded there, and they are also easing restrictions. The government there has, for instance, introduced a new contact tracing app, which is based on the one that was used successfully in Singapore, and already 1 million Australians have downloaded it. But here in the U.S., the person in charge who is tasked with this incredibly difficult moment, with assessing these complicated questions leaders around the world are wrestling with, is a guy who spends his day watching TV and rage tweeting. He doesn't listen to experts. He listens to his buddies. He calls them all the time, like the MyPillow guy. He also appears to lack the ability to actually feel empathy and grief, or even just a basic protective duty towards the public safety of the American people who he represents. And that is why, to go back to the quote I started the show with, that is why his campaign advisors have to couch their arguments to him in political terms, because the idea of lots of dead Americans for no reason might hurt your reelection is the kind of logic he might listen to. And this is how our president is doing it. Just last week, he blurted out he is going to give the commencement address at West Point in June. That was news to West Point, who had sent all their cadets home and now scrambling to get them back to the ceremony, back to their campus in New York, the epicenter of the crisis. Every president always says the toughest thing they have to do is sending young people into harm's way. And here is the president doing just that so he can get his photo op. And all this is happening as the Washington Post reports tonight. The president was warned about this virus, this global pandemic, in his president's daily brief more than a dozen